China's economy is in real danger. I don't think it's necessarily going to implode. I don't think this is the end of the line for the Chinese Communist Party or anything like that. But I could see in 20 years, people looking back at this moment as the beginning of the end. And maybe it'll happen faster. These things, brittle, totalitarian regimes are strong but brittle. They're like marble, right? They're not anti-fragile. And China's been better at the anti-fragility thing, at the flexibility thing, than most tyrannies, thanks in part to the help of technology, right? That for, again, all right, another sidebar. There are two lines of argument that pop up, not just among eggheads and policy wonk types, and particularly among libertarians, in my experience, and social conservatives, in my experience. But there are kind of two views about technology. There are many views about technology, but there are two views that keep coming back and having really powerful cultural influence. And one is that technology is the friend of tyranny. 1984, the Panopticon, Skynet, whatever, right? That the surveillance state is only made possible through technology, and it's and therefore technology is scary and dangerous, and they're going to track you and blah 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 blah. Not saying there's no merit to any of that. That's sort of my point. And then the other point of view is no, technology is on the side of freedom and the individual. The Soviet Union, one of the reasons why it collapsed was, they would lock up their Xerox machines. They weren't called Xerox machines, but their photocopy machines at night because they were so terrified that people would disseminate information. The internet was supposed to sort of bring down communist China because the idea that you could actually police and contain the flow of information on the internet seemed laughable. That sort of gets to my point. Sometimes technology is on the side of tyranny. Sometimes technology is on the side of freedom. Technology is a tool. I think if you do some Greek or Latin, it kind of means tool. And tools do not have a teleology or a morality to them, for the most part. Again, you can come up with strained counterexamples, like certain torture tools. I don't think there's any like super good like quality to them, but for the most part, tools are like fire. You can save lives with fire. You can sterilize instruments. You can cook food. You can provide warmth, whatever. Or you can burn people alive, or burn down people's homes, or set fire to forests with fire. It's amoral. It's non-moral. It's what you do with the tool that matters. Similarly, technology can be on the side of good things or can be on the side of bad things. And China has figured out a way to have it on the side of bad things for now. But that's why I said there's no teleology to it. I don't think, and maybe AI will change all that, but I don't think that there is a guarantee that just because technology is on the side of tyranny now, that it won't be on the side of freedom later. Or maybe it'll be on both sides. We all love the drones, or I should say, people who agree with me love the MacGyver drones that the Ukrainians are coming up with, but we think the drones that the Russians are coming up with are tools of evil. That's how it works. Technology is just technology. It doesn't mean, and I totally with Gene Twangy on how technology can have cultural impacts that are good or bad. Smartphones for teenage girls, I think, have been on net bad. But again, that just points to how you use them. It doesn't point to the underlying material technology. So anyway, China is in real trouble, and they're going to stop reporting all sorts of important data like consumer confidence and youth unemployment. Foreign investment in China is drying up incredibly fast. There was just another thing in the Financial Times yesterday or this morning about that. The lot of big firms are moving their supply chains out of China. and they have a massive over leveraging problem, debt problem because of overbuilding in construction and forcing people, basically making it almost impossible for the average Chinese person to put their life savings anywhere as an investment, anywhere other than basically real estate. And you have all sorts of municipalities that are deeply, deeply in debt. Anyway, I wrote about this, talked about it on the Dispatch podcast yesterday. The thing I want to pivot to is that people are getting the causal arrows all messed up on all of this stuff. There are some people who are sort of saying, see, capitalism has sputtered out in China. Markets have led to this deregulation, as it were, right? It's sort of like the financial crisis arguments here or about Enron or whatever. In effect, the deregulation of the Chinese economy that allowed for this go-go atmosphere is the problem. And then there are other people who say it's not necessarily in conflict, that the economic problems, whether they were caused by capitalism or state planning or whatever, they're causing Xi to pivot towards nationalism to maintain support from the people, right? This is sort of like the bread and circuses argument. If you can't give them bread, give them circuses. If you can't give them, if you can't provide basic social services or rising prosperity, whip up the coalition instinct that is nationalism and talk about greatness, talk about conquest, talk about external enemies, talk about how it's your day in the sun, and that will elicit a certain amount of tolerance for material and economic disappointments. And I think both of those things are wrong. First of all, the prosperity that China experienced, contrary to what the guys at Compact Magazine or Tom Friedman or whatever will tell you, the prosperity in China wasn't from statism. It was from the state withdrawing imperfectly, incompletely, and often corruptly, but withdrawing nonetheless from the private sector, from the economic sphere, to the extent that markets, again, imperfect markets, but better than what they had before, were allowed to function, where you were allowed to invest, where you could have entrepreneurialism and dynamism, and you could have profits, and you could rely on the courts to defend, property rights. You might have to give some bribes and all that kind of stuff. But starting with Deng Xiaoping in 1978, when he said it's glorious to get rich, China started to get out of the way of the economy rather than direct the economy. And that's what pulled hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And there were always different factions within China about, first of all, the wisdom of doing this at all, but second of all, about where it would end and what the ultimate purpose of it was. And I think it's pretty clear that Xi, whatever he thought about the market reforms in general, was of the mind that when we get rich enough, we're going to clamp down on this. And he's got this, these ideological advisors who, basically have written this. We're going to turn off the gravy train. We're going to end the sort of the profit making party and use the accumulated resources we got to double down on social solidarity, social stability, social control, and eventually even socialism. And that's what we're seeing. China is, so like, to be sure, the problems that China is dealing with its economy predate Xi's consolidation of power. But those problems aren't the fruit of markets. They're the fruit of politically corrupted and influenced markets, where the state directs resources into specific spheres and denies accountability to those who make bad bets.